Hi there. So I thought I'd give you an idea of some things to avoid. List of 5 top 10 niggles when I'm looking at other people's indie productions, whether it's a short film that's on YouTube or Vimeo, or whether it's a budget music video, or even some low budget films. There's a lot of people making the same mistakes, which are really easily avoided. So I thought I'd just run through a few of them and see if you can avoid them. So, number one, cinema sins. If you're going to use a matte box, which you probably should, it's a really useful bit of kit. Don't just whack it on the front of your camera and forget about it, and don't set it up properly, because it's there for a purpose. And my biggest bugbear with matte boxes is people that put them on their rail system in front of their lens and then leave a nice big air gap between the lens and the matte box. If that's what you're doing, all you're doing is adding weight to your rig, and it's basically an expensive sunshade, which will probably catch you out. If you have an air gap between your lens and the edge of the matte box, light will come in the back, and at some point it will hit something else and reflect back into the lens, and that will ruin your shot. If you're using filters like a neutral density or a polarizer, and you've got one of those mounted in your matte box, because that's what it's for, and then you don't have this sealed, so the lens has got a gap around the edge, the light will come in the back, it'll hit the glass filter and bounce back into the lens, and you will get a beautiful sort of reflection of the lens on the filter, which the lens will then film, and that manifests itself as like a round halo in your footage. Completely ruins the shot. The other thing is that if your operator is sat either side of the camera, an image of them will be picked up as well. I've seen a couple of shots ruined where you can see the camera op reflecting off the filter because the back of the matte box wasn't sealed. That's just crazy. So you can get one of these things. Ridiculously, this is called nun's knickers, I presume, because they're black. Or you can get a rubber thing called a donut, and there's various sizes. Get the one that fits, get one of these, and seal it properly around your lens. And then the matte box is doing what it's supposed to do, rather than just acting as some kind of posing device to make your camera look bigger. So that's number one. Number two, focus. There's not many things you have to do with your camera. One of them is frame your shot properly, and the other one is get your subject in focus. I see way too many things these days where nothing's in focus, where the character who's delivering the line or whatever we're supposed to be looking at is a bit out, the background's completely out, and you're not sure what you're supposed to be looking at. It just looks really amateur, and it's really fixable. You've got all the various focusing aids on cameras these days, and if you're using an external monitor like an Atomos or a small HD, they've got tools that will help you get your shot in focus. Because if it's not in focus and you still use it, it just gives the impression that you didn't care. So that's not what you want. You want people to not notice that there was a camera there, and they do notice that when it's out of focus, because then you think, oh, someone didn't care about this shot. So get your shot in focus. It's really simple. I know sometimes DSLRs have small screens and it's hard to see, but check your footage back, have a look. If it's not in focus, shoot it again. That's number two. On to number three. Number three is one of those things which is a side effect of trying to make yourself better. Quite often the first rig you'll buy for a DSLR is a shoulder rig, and it's normally the kind where one bit of the back of the rail rests on your shoulder on a pad, and then you've got a couple of handles like this, and then the DSLR mounts up here, which is great. That enables you to get a more sort of cinematic movement into your shots rather than the sort of holding your camera like this. Much better. But if it's too heavy for you, or you use it for too long, or if you're just not careful, you end up getting this wobble side to side because it kind of pivots on your shoulder, the shoulder pad, and you're holding it like this, it pivots. That sometimes gets worse if you've got a follow focus mounted on there and you let go of one of the handles and you go and grab the focus, and as you give it a turn, it sort of nudges like this. And when you look at the footage back in the edit studio, it's got this crazy sideways tilting going on. Sometimes it's just a shake where you're just not holding it still enough. And you might have to use, a stabilizing plugin to fix that, but that's going to reduce your resolution. It's going to take time, and there's just no need for it. If the camera's still, put it on a tripod. If the camera's moving, move it with purpose. Don't stand there shaking, because that is just going to ruin your shot. I know sometimes it's difficult to spot that you're doing it, and sometimes it's heavy and it's been a long day, but if you're tired and you can't hold the camera still, just say to everyone, we need to stop for a bit, I need a little rest. We'll get someone else to take over. Okay, number four, let's talk about exposure. Exposure is difficult if you're working outside, or maybe you're working somewhere inside that's quite dark. It's sometimes difficult to get exposure right. But the problem really arises if you're doing some dialogue or anything with a character in front of the camera and the skin isn't exposed right. Because if skin is overexposed, you look pale and ill. If it's underexposed, any blemishes in your skin seem to get accentuated, and again, you look ill, you don't look good. There's like a sweet spot where human skin just sings and everyone looks great and healthy. And you need to find it. There are exposure tools on a lot of monitors and some cameras which will really help you. False color is a great one, but get the skin exposed right. Everything else is kind of secondary and you can deal with that later, and often you can fix that. But you can't fix it if the exposure on the skin's wrong, so get that right. It's a common mistake, but there's really no excuse for it. If someone's delivering a line and the camera's in front of them, the skin has to look right, so let's work on the exposure. It's easy to do. Finally, number 5, we're going to talk about framing. Framing is mostly about artistic interpretation of how you think something should look. It's up to you to frame things how you want. There's all kinds of cinematic rules you can stick to or ignore, whatever you like. But there's one which just looks wrong. And if you get it wrong, I think it just really gives your film a real amateur sort of problem. It just looks like you haven't studied. And basically, if you're doing a close-up of someone's face, it's absolutely fine and no one bats an eyelid if you crop it there. So you have to keep the chin in. But it's totally fine to cut the hair out. If you do it the other way around, if the face is too low in the frame so that we have the top of their head but the chin is cut off, you just don't see that. You know, you won't see that in a single film anywhere, I don't think, because it looks weird. But it's completely fine and acceptable. You won't even notice you've seen it. In an extreme close-up, we cut off the hair. I don't know why, that's just how it is. But if you do it the other way around, trust me, it will look wrong and you might not know why it looks wrong. So that's it. Study some framing, see how it works. You know, for a 1 shot especially. For a 2 shot, okay, generally you'd be further out and you'd get the tops and bottoms of people's heads anyway. But study it, maybe you wouldn't. Have a look at lots of films, draw little notes, take a notebook to set. I do that all the time. Where is it? I have a notebook. And before I'm about to shoot something, night before, I'll sit down and I'll sketch out some ideas for shots. And it's all about the framing, trying to remind myself what I want to see in the frame. It's important. If you make it up as you go along, you'll end up with all kinds of stuff in the background you don't want. You might not get the right sort of mood or emotion put across. So have a good think about framing. I think if you study all those 5 things, get all those things right, that's the basics for something which looks professional, and hopefully that'll help you. See you later.